If you're a recovering overshooter, watch this video to learn 4 new ways to stop overshooting and maximize your photography workflow. So tip number 1, validate your client by using good pose strategies from the beginning and not trying to use your shutter to make them feel better. I can't tell you how many times as a beginner I went out to a shoot, I just held down that shutter button. It wasn't even for an action or running shot or a jumping shot. It was just, I want to make them feel the best they can, and the easiest feedback I can give them without saying anything was just to click my shutter. That says, yes, that picture was worth taking. Let's do another one. That picture was also worth taking. Oh wow, that pose was so great. Let's get another shot of that. But no, you're making it way harder on yourself. It's a double-edged sword that only compounds in pain the more you actually use it. So it's like a sword that has like a serrated edge and then like a huge anime sword on the other end that just cuts you down in the end of the process. That was dramatic, but I have a point. So, if you're overshooting in the moment to validate the client, you're saying, yes, you're doing fantastic, but you're only giving yourself more work to do in post when you're culling your photos. So by setting up good posing strategies, by knowing what poses you want, knowing how to sequence your poses if you're doing pose flows, or to know the common pitfalls when posing specific poses, over time you'll develop a huge posing repertoire, a huge posing list you have in your mind you can just use and just pull from in the moment's notice. But if you're a beginner photographer, oftentimes you won't have that huge list of things you can work from, and you also won't know what the problems are immediately when you're first using poses. So the easiest way to do it is to get a friend or do TFP shoots, time for photo shoots, where you shoot people for free and so you can workshop your poses. Doing TFP shoots and shooting your friends and family or other models in the area for free as an exchange for their time and for your time as well is a great way to workshop your poses as a new photographer, and that takes away the entire pressure of needing to produce a product that's good for money, which adds a whole bunch more stress that you might not be ready to handle as a beginning photographer. And as you work with more models and more clients, you'll find that even though you have a good pose list, you'll need to actually be able to be more creative on the spot and use the repertoire, use the whole experience you have with posing and all of like the, 50 poses you'll have in the bank, and mix and match those to actually create new poses. So the second tip is to be creative with your poses. I realized I tended to overshoot when I was drawing a blank. When I had no idea, I was out of poses, I was out of ideas, and I was panicking. So I just said, oh yeah, that's a great shot. It was just them going. And I was like, yeah, keep doing that. I'm like, they're like, I haven't done anything. I'm like, you're doing great. So no, you don't want to be that person. You want to make sure you have a good well of poses to pull from and to never let your pose list run dry. This is a great tip if you're in a pinch. I always like starting from a body part. So let's say you're with a wall. A standard pose is you have this flat wall with no juts, you can't sit. You just have a wall and your model and great light. Let's just assume great light. So I would say, oh, let's start with the hand. So what can you do with the hand? You can put the hand on the wall, you can put the hand on your body, you can put the hand on your face, you can put the hand on the ground, and once you start from a single thing, new poses just generate in your mind saying, oh, well, if they were on the ground, what naturally would they be doing? Would they be crouching? Would they be leaning on something? If they were on the wall, maybe they would use their shoulder. That's a very common pose, super easy, great for beginners, is to use the shoulder on the wall technique, maybe with legs crossed at the bottom. That's a solid pose. You can from there make it more creative. Maybe you're doing a creative model shoot where you can and are allowed to do things that are a bit more dramatic or a bit more, tell more of a story, as opposed to doing a more professional corporate style shoot where you would mostly want to just deliver professionalism. So tip number 2, to not overshoot, don't run out of poses and don't just shoot because you're drawing a blank. Tip number 3, don't shoot the micro poses. And hear me out. Every pose will have different variations and different angles you can take to get the best out of each pose. But one huge trap that you'll fall into is trying to find every small detail of a pose. Let's say there's a flyaway that was here, that went to over here, like, oh, I have to catch that. Or maybe their eyes were here, and now their eyes are over here. Like, oh, I need to catch that, do it again. Don't do that. There's something to say for having attention to detail, but Oftentimes, this is just what I found, I'm not saying you're like me, but what I found in myself is that when I'm shooting those kind of micro details, I have also run out of ideas. Again, no offense. And we've already talked about how to not run out of ideas, just one great way of being creative with posing on the spot. But if I'm capturing all those smaller, minute details that really are insignificant, there is such a thing as being too detail-oriented, where you're looking under too much of a microscope. You may be looking under like a 500x microscope, and you only need to be looking under a 25x microscope. And so when I'm looking at all those minute details, I'm not looking ahead. I'm saying I'm stuck in this pose, and I have no idea where to go next. So a lot of these tips revolve around no poses. Once you know poses, you'll be more inclined to look for the next pose and the next pose and the next pose and not be stuck in one. On the flip side, you could say, I have 18 more poses. We have 1,000 more shots. Let's go. Also don't do that. That's also a big trap. Bad. I'm calling them micro poses because that makes the most sense to me. What you really should be shooting for when shooting portraits is shooting the top 5% of the value of the pose. What does that mean? So if you have this idea of a pose in your head, and maybe it's like this solid idea that will change the world, I believe you could do that with a single pose. You specifically. You're great. You have it in your head, and then you shoot it, and you're saying, wow, they've captured the vision I wanted to create with this pose. They're doing it. Take the picture. Maybe there's small adjustments you can make, like maybe their hand could be here as opposed to being here, or maybe their fingers could be softer, or maybe there's a whole bunch of adjustments you can always make. I tend to shoot the adjustments just in case the ones I liked before are the better ones. You don't want to just look at the model. It's not every time that you want to look at the model and just with visual make direction and go to the closest thing in your mind. That's a very good tool, and it shows a lot of maturity if you're able to just look at the model and not shoot and just direct their pose to a certain point and then shoot. That shows maturity. But you're also, it's kind of a give and take there. If you only shoot at the very end, you lose all the good stuff you could be getting in the middle. I digress. And so when you're shooting the top 5% of the value of the pose, you're saying, these capture the closest, the value or the image I had in my mind. These, let's say you had top 3 or 4 poses. Those you'd save. Everything beyond those, once you've gotten the pose, and you know you have, move on. Move on. There's no need to capture the other 95%. The other 95% are just the micro adjustments and the small things that would build up to creating your vision. It's possible to have a 5% loss in your vision and have the most beautiful photo ever. And that's a different video. That talks about more of the value and that you really can't take a bad photo. More on that later. So tip number 3, only capture the top 3 or 4 shots and then move on from your pose. Tip number 4, and if you have a fragile pride, I would recommend you click away. And this might be a controversial topic, but try to avoid ego shooting. Ego shooting is saying, I want to feel like I'm doing something in order to have the most immediate gratification in the shoot, because there's so much else going on that I feel like I'm not doing enough. I will just hold down this shutter and take one more shot, one more shot, one more shot, one more shot. Nothing's changing. Maybe the framing wasn't even there. It wasn't even lined up. The lighting wasn't there for sure. So many things could just not be there. And you're just like, I just need to feel like I need to take this picture to feel like I'm doing something. So when you're ego shooting, that's all you're doing. You're trying to just just to self-soothe in the shoot, saying, I'm doing good, I'm doing good, I'm doing good. But what you're not doing oftentimes when you're ego shooting is you're not in the moment enough directing your client, finding all the details and massaging the details to get to your actual vision that will get to the product within your head, or better yet, within your client's vision. If you're only shooting for yourself and you're not paying close enough attention to what your client feels, or if you're achieving their vision, or between shots, they're giving you feedback and you're saying, oh yeah, we'll work on it later, oh yeah, we'll work on it later, oh yeah, that'll be fine in post. So the issue with ego shooting for me was that my brain was trying to operate at like here, like professionalism, vibe, the next pose, and then what I did before that made me cringe that I should not have said, but I said anyway, like, oh yeah, that eyelash looks great, you should grow another one. No! I was just trying to, so your brain's just operating at max capacity, trying to fill all these things to make them work, and then you just leave so little room to actually see your vision come to play because you're splitting focus so much. So how do you fix that? How do you just get all those things to just work when you're not thinking about them? You have to get so good that you autopilot. And how do you get good? By just doing those things. If you're a gamer, I'm not a gamer, so feel free to just tear down my argument here. But you want to raise those stats individually over time. You want to raise your professionalism over time so it's natural and it's autopiloted. You want to raise your ability to give feedback to the model in the moment over time so it's autopiloted so that you don't have to worry about it. Then you want to raise this and this and this and this to as high as you can so you can leave the most room for you to think slowly. As you see your stats raising, what's actually increasing is your value as a photographer, and as such, your maturity has risen as well. If you can automate as much as possible the things that support the creative process, then you're focusing the majority of the mental power on being creative and being in the moment with your model or with your client. And that's a great feeling. So to stop overshooting, let's just review. 1, don't try to validate your client only through the shutter count. It is such a big trap. Do not fall into that trap. It's like deep and like there's rocks and stuff. Would not recommend. Next, if you're drawing a blank on poses, get creative. Start with building blocks of poses. Start with limbs. Start with feet, hands, arms, facial expressions. Build from the building blocks of poses, and then the pose will emerge in your mind. And also, I would recommend having a good pose list. You will not know how to pose someone if you don't know what poses there are. So go out there, look and experience what people are doing in all different realms of photography. And so that's fashion, that's family, lifestyle, corporate. Like, use all these different tools and just have them at your disposal to use later. A lot of the times, poses don't exist in a vacuum. They're just different permutations, and this I actually go into in a different video, but poses are actually different permutations of different things that have evolved through time. So you can actually add and create new poses just in your shoots by being creative. So go out and learn more poses. And third, don't worry about the micro situations of a pose. Don't worry about all the small details like the hair is this way, or the eyes are over here, or the hands here, or it should have been here. It's not always important. You can, and I have been too detail oriented. Zoom out a little bit. Zoom out a little because it's like a camera. Zoom out a little bit and just see the bigger picture. Oftentimes the small stuff doesn't matter. So that means that you need to be able to communicate your pose to the client and your adjustments to the client in an effective way for them to reach the top 5%, for them to reach the maximum value of the pose or their vision that they're bringing or that you're bringing to the table. So tip number 3, don't sweat the small stuff. Tip number 4, stop ego shooting. Don't shoot just to make yourself feel better. That's an easy trap to fall into, as easy of a trap to fall into as the first one. So stop doing that. So get out there and find people to shoot with you and to help build your repertoire of knowledge of how to conduct a shoot, how to be professional, how to deliver feedback on poses. And also to keep the energy of a shoot where you want it to be. Not every shoot needs to be like, I'm so happy to be here. It does not need to be like that. And you also don't want to be like, I've had kind of a rough day and I just want to go out and get some, do you want to go McDonald's together? It's just down the street, 2-for-1 discount on the nuggets, we can share. You won't be that person, no. Over time, as you continue to shoot, you want to raise your value as a photographer and become more mature by raising your stats. And those are all the small things that underpin the creative process. The creative process sits on top of it, and it's the thing that's the most malleable and fun to work with. But you need a strong foundation of communication and vision in order to best support your creative process. Personally, I would recommend, if you found this video helpful, I would recommend subscribing. That would just be my, if you're asking me, if you wanted my opinion, that's what I would do, because it would just be the easiest. It's like a one-click away thing for all this value of all these tips that you can be getting all the time. And don't you just want to hear more of me? No, if not, you can just click away, that's fine.